right, and let's kick this off. So it's an early morning for me. So and I'm not a morning person, as I mentioned. So if this might be a little hectic, but if I get stuck at any point, just I'll get there. I'm still going through my morning coffee, so bear with me here. So greetings from Bay Area, California, where I've been spending my last almost 10 years working for various companies in Silicon Valley. And today I'll be talking about bootstrapping an SRE team. And this talk is a little bit of my personal recollections and kind of post-mortem of how the journey that we went through happened. And I hope you find it useful. So let's kick it off. So let's set the stage. So a few words about myself. As I said, I worked in the Valley for the past almost 10 years. I spent five of those years working on Facebook prior to joining a startup called SignalFX a couple of years ago. And that's precisely what we're going to focus on today. I joined as the first SRE at SignalFX, and to get the most of this the story, you need to know a little bit about that. So it's an infrastructure monitoring start. It was an infrastructure monitoring startup. We got acquired last year, so that's why I'm saying it was. And it was on the market for a few years. It was operating on a massive scale. We're talking about like hundreds of millions of data points, and with very low latency. So the engineering was about 60, 80 people or something like that when I joined. So it was sizable, right? It was reputable. It was not both the scale of operation and the volume of data and the amount of people involved was large enough to be at the point of, yeah, we've been running our production environments and our infrastructure without the need of dedicated operations team, without the need for too much tooling that we have people that will purpose build for us. Everything was kind of homegrown, crowdsourced by the engineering team. So, and this being a company that was its bread and butter was or is infrastructure monitoring, which is very close to every DevOps SRE or infrastructure person's heart. They knew how to handle infrastructure for the most part. Like it was to operate on such a massive scale, they had to. There was no other choice, especially with the high SLAs and low latency. And they prided themselves in being a sort of an ops organization to a degree, which means everything was kind of handled by all the infrastructure bits, or most of the infrastructure bits, and ownership of third-party services, which is like Zookeeper, Kafka's, Cassandra's, MongoDBs, what have you, were owned and operated at scale by the teams that used them. Okay. So with that, and there I was, 2019, joining as the first SRE. And what is even, like, in such a situation, what is even your purpose, right? The engineers know how to handle production. They've been doing this for a few years. Production is stable. Everything, continuous delivery works. There's like, problems are for the most part solved, but you're not gonna provide fundamental value or a lot of value by just like writing Terraform or whatever have you. And so it was natural to look for targets, look for stuff to tackle as we were planning to build a team. And it was a very target-rich environment, right? Because as a new person joining, especially in our space, when we like any infrastructure or DevOps orientated people are very much into like process and doing things the right way and like, delivering software at sustainable and like manageable pace. There are like very many things that you jump into an organization and you want to fix, right? You want to address all the issues. You want to deliver value all over the place, right? And I fall into that trap myself. And I'm saying trap because in the end, the ruthless prioritization of your efforts is the key in such a situation. And here's why: you need you want to get the buy-in from the organization. You want to sell that the SRE team is delivering something that is actually changing the organization for the better. You're not necessarily going to do that by just doing small things over the place. You pick the big targets, not the widespread, like all the ones that you want to fix necessarily, right? So as I said, it was a target-rich environment with lots of hectic processes, but also a lot of good and a lot of like everything was services. So we needed to pick our battles carefully. And at this point, we already started growing. It was like, let's say, half a year into the journey. There were 3 of us or something like that, and it's natural to grab the low-hanging fruit and run with them without really justifying your picks, right? And I'm not naturally I'm fundamentally data-driven person, but if you have your kind of hands in so many things at once, you won't necessarily. It will be an afterthought sometimes to stop and try to gather the data for like what is most important. Because like in such environment, gathering data for, I don't know, fixing on-call and actually quantifying the on-call pain, or like doing SLA calculations based on actual meaningful metrics, it's going to take time, right? But at the same, so you're either gathering data and trying to sell pick the biggest, most impactful things, or you're doing all the things at once. So it was a trap. It was a little bit of a trap, which we navigated, which we avoided for the most part. But it's something definitely to take to pay close attention to. So basically, driving your decisions, driving the things you're tackling with data, and being very deliberate about the engagements you're doing. The other thing about this is about building up a SRE team within an organization that already kind of handles all the things that SRE can provide themselves, or at least they think they do. Is you need to establish trust, and try in such situations, especially in our line of work, trust is often built at 3 a.m. In outage channel during a situation that needs to be handled. So there were many sleepless nights just dealing with issues and trying to be as helpful as possible, but being there and basically living through what the engineers were living through, just basically soaking it in and showing that you're there, if you want to change and if you want to jump in and help with that process, you need to kind of live that process a little bit. So, and at that point, there were already a bunch of us. As I said, three, four people. It was still kind of hectic. It was still kind of reactive to everything that was happening, but we were already starting to identify the biggest kind of biggest impact items. And so it turned out the biggest and most impactful things to be done was ownership of the services that I mentioned prior, which is everything that is not developed in-house, right? And in most architectures, at least in ours, in this case, that's a big target. So there will be like multiple numerous third-party services. Like you're going to have your humongous Cassandra clusters. You're going to have your Elasticsearch. You're going to have your Kafka Zookeeper and everything else on top of it. And just getting a hold of all those pieces is a challenge by itself. So it took us quite a while to actually wrap our heads around those things and start not necessarily owning them first, but at least like moving them in the right direction. Because like at this point, we're 3-4 people, 3-4 engineers in the SRE team. And what's at this stage, what's also crucial is defining the value that you're actually delivering. And let me give you an example. So if there is a service that the SRE team has no context on whatsoever, and we really if we were to onboard it as one of our kind of own it and onboard it as our own, we'd have to acquire so much knowledge and so much like testing, and because if we are going to own it, we're going to own it fully, right? But the time is pressing. The launch date is soon. That particular third party, like say it's Mongo or whatever it is, needs to be in production by yesterday. It happens, right? And at the same time, the development team already has a little bit of know-how built. So it's in such cases, we deliberately refused to take those up, and it was mutually agreed that we're not going to deliver value, so we're not even going to pretend, right? Which is basically like picking your targets and sticking to them. Don't spread yourself too thin, which at some points we were, but at this stage, which is like we're still kind of reactive to what's going on. We're still not there to be like fully. We have a grasp of everything that we want to own. We're still moving in a sort of not firefighting mode, but just like picking things up as they happen and as they delivering value on opportunistic basis. So one of the mistakes that we might have made was trying to drive production readiness. And for those of you that might know, so or like let me explain what that means. Basically, we wanted to establish some sort of non-functional definition of done, if you want to put it in Scrum terms, which is like if something gets put in production, it needs to meet certain criteria, and those are very this is stuff like high availability, maintainability, performance metrics, scalability of the new service, stuff like that, right? And even doing such an evaluations for existing infrastructure, existing components, existing pieces, right? We were at this point, we were probably like at least a year too early. we didn't have a good grasp of our own services that we took upon ourselves yet, and we're already jumping into, right, let's drive this across the board, right? So in such cases, lead by example. Like now, a year and a half later from the time, we got enough grasp over our own services that we operate, and enough clout inside of the engineering that we can comfortably drive such efforts and actually kind of spearhead such efforts inside of engineering. But picking those like big targets like this too early kind of bit us in the ass a little, and was quite a waste of time actually. Another one that is sort of related, but maybe not that much, is like part of like what infrastructure people or SRE folks do is establishing processes around like the things that are mentioned, right? And here, like as an example, like the organization already had great incident reporting, incident dependent like write-ups for incidents for the most part, but sometimes the learnings from them were not driven all the way, right? They were not necessarily applied, right? Because like things fall through the cracks as they do, unless you have someone actually like looking at those things on a regular basis and like talking to engineers every week, stuff like that. It's gonna kind of dissipate usually, especially if the volume of change in the environments and volume of change in volume of incidents is high, kind of, right? So so you establish the process, right? As you do, you establish the like incident reviews, like scrutinize incident reports, stuff like that. But like for as much as you can, at least that's my view of this, is that you want to set this up and let the engineering team drive it. Like you set the process and kind of take a step back. I know it's way harder, but you're magnifying your impact on the organization by letting it go, by removing yourself from the critical path. The way I'm hoping to do this, we're not just there yet, is like letting not only SRE drive the process. We can establish it and we can help, right? But having others, like having rest of engineering, kind of be the point. And we can like it can be rotational, we can like however you set it up. So what is like going back to the original question, like what's the point of this entire exercise? You go in, you establish a team, and you start writing Terraform and or whatever it is, you make the infrastructure better. But what that's one way to do it. That's one way to do it. But at the same time, if you want to have larger organizational impact, you can also think about this in terms of change management of the process, right? So what I mean by that, like fundamentally DevOps is like this intersection of tools, processes, and people, right? And what's in the intersection is driving the change in a way that the organization can handle, while like maximizing the value delivered. As I mentioned earlier, like you want to have very focused effort, right? But at the same time, like change management in an organization is hard. Introducing all those things like that is bread and butter for SREs is hard. And to like jumping on all of them at once, as we did to some extent or tried to, you need to take it slow, and you need to deliver like incremental value and prioritize your efforts very, very, very carefully. And if you can base it on data, even better, right? And going for like, so this was basically the first year and a half, right? Now 2 years later, we went from 1 SRE engineer to 8. Quite a growth. We got a hold of all the services that we own. We got a hold of the processes we own. And at some point, you're going to transition from this like reactive of installing fire alarms all over the place and kind of trying to put out the fires and spending your nights in outage to spearheading efforts, right? But if you don't gauge where the organization is well enough, and you kind of jump to the proactive efforts or trying to do the proactive efforts too early, you're just going to spin your wheels. There might be some, like, there will be like some value, at least perceived value delivered. But you cannot really skip steps on that maturity curve, if you will. So I haven't mentioned that prior, but gauging where the organization is, or what the organization really needs from their SREs, is probably the hardest part of this entire endeavor, at least for me it was. So as I said, where are we now? We kind of got a good grasp, right? But it took us 2 years to get from a very reactive to mostly proactive, and actually like driving the maturity forward and get going from one to the other, right? So you cannot go from 0 to 100 or 0 to like all the, like basically take the SRE book and start implementing it as like we didn't do that, but I think I heard horror stories about, like, not horror stories, but not necessarily success stories, how that fails. So it's baby steps. It's baby steps from day 0 and ruthless prioritization. If you really want to like make a change, make a dent, deliver meaningful impact. Yeah. So a couple of resources if you're interested in that sort of framework of thinking of our line of work as a way of changing the organization. Like great watch, great talk by Leonid, our former VP of engineering, and obviously lots of great resources from Google SRE philosophy. That's kind of a staple of that genre, if you will. I'll put both links in the Discord afterwards, and they're obviously easily Googleable. And with that, thank you so much. Thank you to the organizers for putting this together. I was hoping to be there and have a beer with you guys in a couple hours, but obviously 2020 is a weird timeline we live in. So this will have to make do. And thanks to my amazing team at Splunk and LFX. I don't know how many of them are listening, but you guys rock, and I'm proud of where we got. So with that, thank you, and I'm open for questions.